A woman steps into the street. It is July in a city called Strasbourg in the year 1518. The stone is warm under her feet. There is no music playing. No festival has been announced. No one has asked her to dance. And yet she begins. Her arms lift. Her hips turn. Her feet find a rhythm that comes from nowhere at all. No drum, no fiddle, no voice humming a tune. Just her body, moving on its own, in the middle of a street, in the middle of the day, for no reason anyone can name. At first, the neighbors laugh. A woman dancing alone in the street is not tragedy. It's comedy, the kind of small, strange moment that gets mentioned once at dinner and forgotten by morning. Except she does not stop. Not after an hour, not after the sun goes down, not after her feet begin to bleed for a long time without stopping. She dances through the night, she dances into the next day, and somewhere around the fourth day, without any explanation that satisfied anyone then or now, other people in Strasbourg begin dancing too. Within a month, historical records suggest, as many as 400 people were dancing in the streets of the city, unable, or unwilling, to stop. Some of them, according to the accounts, danced until they collapsed. Some, it's claimed, danced until their hearts simply gave out. This is not folklore. This happened. The city's response tells you almost as much as the event itself. You might expect panic, prayer, quarantine. Instead, the physicians of Strasbourg reached a diagnosis that sounds absurd today and made perfect sense at the time. The dancers had hot blood, and the only cure for too much dancing was more dancing. So the city built stages. It hired musicians. It cleared out guild halls specifically so the afflicted could keep moving, on the theory that if they danced hard enough, long enough, the affliction would burn itself out. It did not. If anything, the music and the public stages seemed to have made things worse, pulling more people into the street, feeding whatever was moving through the crowd like fuel on a fire nobody could see. Eventually, the city changed its strategy entirely. Music was banned. The dancers were quietly moved out of the city to a shrine dedicated to St. Vitus, a saint many believed had the power to cure this mysterious affliction, a saint whose legend, centuries earlier, had already been tangled up with the idea of compulsive, punishing dance. And slowly, no one agrees exactly how or why, it stopped. Here is the detail that turns this from a strange historical footnote into something genuinely unsettling. Strasbourg was not an isolated case. Chronicles from the centuries before and after describe outbreaks of compulsive, uncontrollable dancing across parts of medieval Europe. Groups of people moving through towns, unable to stop, sometimes for days, occasionally described as foaming, crying out, or collapsing from exhaustion. Different towns, different decades, the same impossible symptom. A phenomenon that repeats itself in different places, across different generations, is not usually a coincidence. It's a pattern, and patterns demand an explanation. For a long time, the leading theory was biological, a toxic mold called ergot, which grows on damp rye and can produce effects distantly related to certain modern psychoactive compounds, muscle spasms, hallucinations, a feeling of burning in the limbs. It's a tidy explanation. Contaminated grain, a bad harvest, and suddenly a town full of people experiencing violent involuntary movement. But researchers who have studied the Strasbourg case in detail point to something the ergot theory struggles to explain. Ergot poisoning tends to constrict blood vessels so severely that sustained, coordinated dancing for days on end becomes almost physically impossible. So historians went looking somewhere else entirely, not in the wheat fields, but in the minds of the people themselves. To understand Strasbourg in 1518, you have to understand what the city had already survived. In the years leading up to the outbreak, The region had been hit by famine, crop failures, and a wave of disease that killed a significant portion of the population. Taxes were crushing. Syphilis, a disease Europe had never seen before, was spreading with a virulence that terrified people who had no explanation for it and no defense against it. Strasbourg, in other words, was a city already living at the edge of what it could psychologically absorb. The theory that has gained the most traction among historians is that Strasbourg's dancing was not caused by poison in the grain. It was caused by grief with nowhere left to go. This is the part of the story that stops being about the 16th century and starts being about all of us. The body, when overwhelmed past its limit, doesn't always go quiet. Sometimes it goes loud. It moves. It shakes. It performs, involuntarily, a panic the mind can no longer hold in silence. Researchers have a name for what likely spread through that crowd: mass psychogenic illness, a well-documented phenomenon in which psychological distress moves through a group the way a symptom moves through a body, not through infection, but through observation, fear, and belief. One woman dancing is strange. 100 people dancing in a city that already believed dancing sickness was a real and terrifying curse is something else entirely. It spreads because belief does. Here's the detail that makes it worse. The people of Strasbourg had no word for what was happening to them. They couldn't say, "We are traumatized." The concept didn't exist yet. They had no vocabulary for what a body does when suffering exceeds what a mind can carry. So the body did what bodies sometimes do when there's nowhere else for the pain to go. It moved, uncontrollably, publicly, until, for some of them, it collapsed entirely. These weren't foolish people or uniquely superstitious ones. They were ordinary survivors of famine, plague, and a terrifying new disease, in a world that offered no therapy, no diagnosis, and no permission to simply say, "I cannot carry this anymore." Their bodies said it for them. And 4 centuries later, the same basic mechanism still shows up. In schools, in factories, in offices under acute collective stress. Different costume, same body, still speaking when the mind runs out of words. We like to believe the line between the medieval mind and the modern one is a hard, clean border, that we have outgrown whatever made a city of otherwise rational people believe dancing itself could be a plague. But the mechanism underneath the story hasn't disappeared. It has only changed its costume. Psychological distress still finds its way into the body when there is no other outlet for it. And societies still, quietly, invent explanations that let them avoid looking directly at the thing that's actually breaking their people. Strasbourg didn't build stages and hire musicians because it understood what was happening. It built them because understanding was the one thing it could not afford to face. 400 people danced because the truth of what they were living through had nowhere else left to go. The only real question left is not what happened to them. It's what our own bodies are trying to tell us right now that we have not yet found the language to say out loud.